Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I am Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. US President Donald Trump is set to host his first ever summit with all 5 Central Asian leaders in Washington. The summit comes just months after these leaders held separate meetings with Presidents Vladimir Putin of Russia and Xi Jinping of China. Kenya's President William Ruto speaks with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, discussing the implementation of a bilateral labour agreement that offers more job opportunities for Kenyans in Germany. Officials in Ethiopia's Afar region say it's under attack from forces in the neighbouring Tigray region, claiming Tigrayan fighters have seized villages and bombed civilians as the internal conflict continues to rise. South Africa says 17 of its citizens fighting as mercenaries in Ukraine's war-torn Donbas region have pleaded for help to return home. Pretoria did not specify whether these nationals were fighting for Russia or for Ukraine. And Cameroon's Paul Biya is sworn in as president for an 8th term in his 43rd year in power, following a contested election that sparked deadly mass protests. We start in Nigeria. The West African nation has dismissed US claims that Christians are being persecuted in the country. Abuja has described the accusations laid by the Trump administration as fundamentally misinformed. But even as President Bola Tinubu's government pushes back against Washington's criticism, it says it remains open to cooperation on security. The country's information minister said Nigeria welcomes support from foreign nations, including the US, in addressing the complete elimination of terrorism. Let's listen in.
The government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is well appraised of the level of anxiety created by the designation of our country as a country of particular concern, or CPC, by the US government, and the threats of military action by the President of the United States, following a wrong perception and misrepresentation of the security challenges in our country.
Well, this diplomatic row began last week after the US designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern. This is a label used by the State Department for nations accused of violating religious freedom. Trump said the move came in response to what he called, quote-unquote, the killing of Christians by radical Islamists. Nigeria's northeast has been battling Boko Haram and Islamic State-linked insurgents for more than a decade. The violence has killed over 40,000 people and displaced nearly 2 million, according to the United Nations. Nigerian officials argue that this is not a religious war, but a fight against terrorism. President Trump, however, has threatened possible military strikes against what he called Islamic terrorists in Nigeria. On October the 2nd, Trump announced on his Truth Social account that his administration would halt all aid and assistance to Africa's most populous country. Trump repeated the same threat on November the 5th.
If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. We're going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about, and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible, horrible atrocities. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians.
Trump's comments have angered many in Nigeria. A leading Islamic cleric on November the 4th said that Trump's comments risk inflaming religious tensions and that the White House is misrepresenting Nigeria's ground reality.
Now it's coming to be like between Muslims and Christians. Even though there are a lot of Christians who have known that the narrative is wrong, it's a representation of reality on ground. Many Christians know that. So Nigeria should reciprocate whatever the tune of Trump's allegations are, because he did it not in a diplomatic way.
And complicating matters further, Nigeria currently has no ambassador posted in Washington. President Bola Tinubu recalled most of the country's envoys last year as part of an administrative review, and replacements are yet to be named. That absence, the Nigerian information minister has suggested, may have allowed separatist groups in Nigeria's southeast to shape Trump's administration's perception. Nigeria, home to more than 200 ethnic groups and a near even split between Muslims and Christians, has a long history of coexistence, even amidst sporadic violence. For now, Abuja is pushing back against what it calls misguided foreign criticism, while keeping a cautious hand extended towards Washington. And for more on this, we have with us Inebehe Effiong, who is an activist and human rights lawyer, joining us live from Abuja. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to first look at the situation on the ground. Is there any validity to Trump's claims of Christians being persecuted in Nigeria?
There is no doubt that Nigeria has witnessed decades of what appears to be systemic and, to a large extent, state-enabled targeting of persons and communities, which is largely or to a greater extent influenced by religious sentiment. I don't think that point can be genuinely contested. Across many parts of Nigeria today, particularly the area in Nigeria called the Middle Belt, that is the north-central part of Nigeria, the states of Plateau, Benue, and so on, they have been targeted attacks, systemic attacks on communities that are largely populated by people of the Christian faith. That is just simply the truth. There have been killings upon killings, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. The Nigerian government has failed to address these killings. We had, for example, what was called the Owo massacre, where Islamist militias, if I could call them that, basically invaded a church in a state called Ondo State, southwestern Nigeria, during a Sunday service mass, and slaughtered almost all the worshippers. This is not an isolated case. As I said, these killings have been going on over the years. So when Trump says that Christians are being persecuted, that position cannot be completely be dismissed. What is, however, also correct is that these killings are essentially as the result of failure of governance. The Nigerian government has shown complicity in the slaughter of Nigerians, the killing of Nigerians, including Muslims, who are also victims of this terrorism and terrorist attack across the country. So for anyone to simply sit comfortably and say that there is no mass killing going on in Nigeria, it is simply false. And I believe that it has taken the intervention of President Trump to basically bring the conversation to a national and international pedestal in a manner that we have not seen possibly before. The Nigerian government has been very, very docile, very, very irresponsible in addressing these killings. These terrorists simply go into communities, rape women, displace the indigenous people of the communities, take over their lands. In fact, in some cases, they even rename those communities. In other instances, they impose ransoms on those communities, force them to pay, as a precondition for not simply displacing everyone. So these things have been going on. There are documented examples that one can easily look at to corroborate the fact that indeed there is systematic targeting of communities of faith. Several churches have been burnt, hundreds of churches have been burnt, religious leaders, pastors have been killed and targeted without justice.
Yes.
That is the painful part of this. When these crimes are committed, the state simply stay aloof, no serious arrests are made, we don't see swift and serious prosecution. So that now gives the impression that maybe the government has a hand in what is going on.
Yes.
For example,
I want to, sorry to interject. I just want to look at that government response as you've been talking about. Of course, Trump's comments have been detailed, but do you think this rebuttal from Abuja risks backfiring against the Nigerian government?
The rebuttal doesn't have any credibility as far as some of us are concerned. What they are saying, if you watch and listen and read very carefully the statements coming from the Nigerian government, they are not really denying that these killings are going on. What they are saying is that the killings are not limited to Christians, right? They don't like the use of the word Christian. That is where they have an objection. That is what their objection is. Now, why are you calling it a Christian genocide when Muslims have also been killed? And the question is, the Muslims who are being killed, are they not Nigerians? Okay, so why are you citing the killing of Muslims as a justification to the killing of Christians? It simply shows that the government is not responsible. So I believe that the way they have handled the issue so far is very poor. They are still pretending. And look, the United States government has all the intelligence. They know what is going on. They understand the intricacies of this crisis. I do not think that the response of the Nigerian government has helped the conversation at all. Because when you say Muslims have also been killed, yes, that is true. But by who? By who? Who are the people that are also killing the Muslims, that are also targeting Islamic religious centers? And why are they not being brought to justice? Why are we not seeing serious arrests? How come that these killings are taking place sometimes under the full glare of our security forces? The army has been accused of standing idle while communities are invaded, while people are slaughtered. Communities have even accused the army of working in some cases with the terrorists. The government has never shown any serious willingness, honest determination to investigate these allegations. So I personally do not believe that the Nigerian government's hands are clean in these killings. The government is playing politics with it, even at this moment, they choose to look at it from a purely political dimension. Whereas we are dealing with human lives, we are dealing with the liberty and the fundamental rights of the Nigerian people, which have been completely disregarded by these terrorists who are having a field day. And guess what? The government even claims that many of these terrorists are not Nigerians, that they are from Libya, they are from Niger, they are from Chad, and some other part of the Sahel. So how come that they have such a free pass to cross Nigerian borders, come into Nigeria, slaughter Nigerians, and nothing is done to them? The other aspect is that there are clear examples when Nigerian officials, both at the national and sub-regional levels, have been holding meetings trying to appease these terrorists. They claim they are pursuing a so-called non-kinetic strategy of offering amnesty and appeasement money to terrorists who are killing Nigerians. So the government has a lot of explanation to offer, not only to the American government, but to the international community.
Yes, absolutely. Inebehe Effiong, thank you ever so much for joining us. A lot of questions still to be answered, and what next is something else that we will keep an eye on. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure speaking with you.
Shifting focus now to South Africa. US President Donald Trump said that the country should not be part of the G20 or the Group of 20 economies. Trump called what's happening in South Africa bad without explaining what he meant. His rather ambiguous comments come just weeks before the G20 summit. South Africa is set to host the summit in Johannesburg starting on November the 22nd. Speaking at a conference in Miami, the US president said he would not attend the upcoming G20 meeting, claiming South Africa shouldn't even be in the Gs anymore. Vice President J.D. Vance is now scheduled to attend in his place.
For generations, Miami has been a haven for those fleeing communist tyranny in South Africa. I mean, if you take a look at what's going on in parts of South Africa, look at South Africa, what's going on. Look at South America, what's going on. You know, I'm not going to, we have a G20 meeting in South Africa. South Africa shouldn't even be in the Gs anymore because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told him I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there. It shouldn't be there.
The comments echo a familiar theme for Trump, portraying South Africa through claims of white genocide. As president, he has repeatedly described white South Africans as fleeing a terrible situation and has accused Pretoria of targeting white farmers. These claims have been dismissed by South African authorities and independent rights groups. Whites make up just 7% of South Africa's population, yet own roughly 2/3 of farmland and earn on average 3 times more than black South Africans. Experts say these inequalities are a legacy of apartheid, not evidence of persecution. Pretoria says its land reform programme aims to correct those historical injustices, not to target any specific community. The divide over perception and history came into sharp focus earlier this year when Trump hosted South African President Cyril Ramaphosa at the White House. What began as a bilateral meeting turned tense when Trump confronted Ramaphosa with claims of attacks on white farmers. Trump even played a video he said showed alleged executions of white South Africans. Later, it was found that part of the footage Trump played included unreleased scenes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, not South Africa.
And those people in many cases are being executed. They're being executed. And they happen to be white, and most of them happen to be farmers. And that's a tough situation. I don't know how you explain that. How do you explain that? They're taking people's land away.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No. I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen.
Trump's latest remarks that South Africa shouldn't even be in the G20 now risk reigniting that same controversy, just as the country prepares to host world leaders. Next, we head to Tanzania, where there has been another twist following the country's controversial election last week. Now, the African Union has made a statement on the largely unopposed election that saw President Samia Suluhu Hassan stroll to victory. But before we dive into the AU's findings, let's provide some context on the election and subsequent controversies first. On October the 29th, polls across Tanzania and Zanzibar opened amid widespread protests. Leading opposition figures were either barred or jailed heading into the vote. Demonstrators spoke out against an election with almost no opposition and the following violence.
They are liars. The current president, while assuming office in 2020, was on the front line in the fight against extrajudicial killings. Among the things she promised to fix is early voting, but you find the flaws are still the same. So if it was only about talk, then they would unite this nation. But in practice, this regime cannot do it.
The main opposition Chadema party denounced the election as a sham, and before the official results had been announced, violence was playing out on the streets, with videos showing dozens of dead bodies. Security forces hit back against protesters with live bullets and tear gas. Opposition figures allege that more than 800 people died at the hands of security forces, and the government has denied these figures. The Chadema party says bodies were secretly dumped in mass graves after being rounded up by police. When the result was announced, President Hassan had won with around 98% of the vote. She was sworn in with no public attendance. And the African Union's election arm have now had their say. A team of 72 observers were sent to monitor this election.
The election did not comply with AU principles, normative frameworks, and other international obligations and standards for democratic elections, not conducive to peaceful conduct and acceptance of electoral outcomes.
The African Union pointed to ballot stuffing, a form of election fraud. AU monitors also highlighted the government imposed an internet blackout, politically motivated abductions, and excessive military force, compromising election integrity. The AU has urged Tanzanian authorities to conduct thorough investigations into violence against protesters.
Tanzania should prioritize electoral and political reforms to address the root causes of its democratic and electoral challenges witnessed ahead of, during, and after the 2025 general elections.
The African Union report comes amid another rebuke, this time from the Southern African Development Community. It detailed violence, censorship, and intimidation of the public and opposition figures. But this has not deterred the Hassan government. Aside from a lack of government acknowledgement over the election violence and civilian deaths, the crackdown on opposition figures has continued. Lawyers for the vice president of the Chadema party, John Heche, have confirmed he is facing terrorism charges. Heche is being held in the financial capital of Dar es Salaam, the city that witnessed much of the violence. Pressure is mounting within Africa against the Hassan government's conduct during an election shrouded in controversy. Their response to protests has also been thrust under a microscope as the Tanzanian authorities push on with action against the opposition. Hassan is standing firm, in control of the government, but now not necessarily the narrative. And finally, we go to Uganda. The East African nation is beaming with pride over the victory of Kampala-born Zoran Mamdani in New York's mayoral election. Mamdani's win in New York has sparked celebrations halfway across the world at the country of his birth. In Kampala, Mamdani's old colleagues remember him as a curious young intern who once worked in the city's newsrooms. Joseph Bayanga, who mentored Mamdani during a radio job in 2007, says his victory is bigger than politics. It's a sign of generations ready to lead. Let's listen in.
I am elated. I am excited. I'm proud of you. Young man, yeah! We did it. We did it. This is why I say we did it. He doesn't just represent himself. He represents a generation, a new generation of leaders who are saying, hey, this is our time. Our time is not in the future. Our time is now to step in and change our situation. We don't want to be told that we are the leaders of the future. No, we determine our future now.
And one of his old friends, a radio host, remembers him not as a politician, but as a creative, funny musician with a quirky streak.
I got to know Zoran when he was part of a really dope rap duo known as Young Cardamom and Hab. I was working at XFM at the time, and we'd heard about his music, and we just thought he was a very interesting character. So we had invited him onto the show just for an interview. And we ended up getting along really well because he's just a very funny, intelligent, sort of very sparky individual.
Across Kampala's busy markets and traffic-choked streets, young Ugandans say Mamdani's win proves that success has no zip code.
I think what the young people can pick from his story is that there's no time limit to becoming a leader, taking up these big positions. And I really hope having people like Mamdani taking leadership in big cities like New York could change something among the young people in Uganda to actually come to the understanding that, you know, being born in Uganda, you can actually make good things. And if there's anyone who is going to change this country, it really has to be us, the younger generation.
Born in Kampala in 1990 to political scholar Mahmoud Mamdani and filmmaker Mira Naya, Zoran left Uganda aged 5. But the family still keeps a home in the city and visits often. For many Ugandans, his rise to mayor of New York feels like a personal win, a celebration of resilience, roots and possibility. Ugandans are exuberant that Zoran Mamdani will be the next mayor of New York, making history as the first Muslim and the youngest in more than a century to hold the city's highest office. The Ugandan-born democratic socialist ran a spirited campaign to beat 2 opponents, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and Republican Curtis Liwa. As New York celebrates its new mayor, Kampala too is soaking in the pride, watching one of its own climb the global stage and a reminder of a new generation that ambition can truly cross continents. That's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thank you for watching.